us about the situation here. Maybe, do you think there must be steps that are being taken for the municipality about the amount of money that they have returned back to the Treasury?
Absolutely. I think if any one jurisdiction had any one of the challenges that Emfuleni has, it would be a huge travesty. It would be abomination. It would be devastating. Emfuleni has got all of the following: sewage seeping through the street into people's houses, poor road infrastructure, poor drainage systems that leads to flooding, and poor management of finances. To have a whopping 260 million rand sent back to Treasury because it was not able to be spent on infrastructure when there is such a dire need is absolutely a human rights violation. We are of the firm view that heads must roll. People need to be fired. People need to be held liable. Now, there are three main reasons why there is underspending in any municipality. The first one being a lack of capacity. So perhaps maybe there's insufficient personnel in terms of numbers for supply chain management. This is not so common. The second one is something that we see more often: a lack of capability, where people are not able to spend according to the prescripts of government and as well as the policies and regulations. The third one is absolutely widespread, and this is the case here in Emfuleni, and that is corruption. So you see that Ayanda is in charge of a tender process. I want to give my friend Lumka a tender. Lumka doesn't have SARS certification as yet, and I withhold that process and delay it intentionally so that my friends can apply and my friends can get the kickbacks instead of giving it to companies that are deserving and that can carry out the duties. There's corruption at play here. There is no political will to change the situation in Emfuleni, and people need to be held criminally liable.
Thank you so much, Ayanda, for speaking to us.
Thank you.
Good people, fellow citizens, patriots of this nation. Today, we are going to talk about a scandal, an outrage, an absolute abomination that is unfolding in our very own backyard in the community of Emfuleni. And let me tell you, what is happening there is not just a failure of governance, it is a blatant, indefensible violation of human rights. Imagine, if you will, a community grappling with just one, of these soul-crushing challenges: sewage seeping into homes, roads so dilapidated they are virtually impassable, drainage systems that turn streets into rivers with every rainfall, leading to devastating floods. Any single one of these, by itself, would be a monumental tragedy, a clear sign of gross negligence from those elected to serve. But Emfuleni, my friends, Emfuleni is burdened with all of them. Every single one of these horrors is the daily reality for the resilient, yet suffering, people of Emfuleni. And then, as if the existing suffering wasn't enough, we are confronted with a truth so galling, so utterly devoid of compassion, it makes your blood boil. A staggering, a whopping, a disgraceful 260 million rand has been sent back to the National Treasury. Not because Emfuleni doesn't need it. Not because the infrastructure is perfect. But because, by some unfathomable, unacceptable failure, this money earmarked for the very infrastructure that could alleviate their suffering, was simply not spent. Let me be unequivocally clear, this is not just a bureaucratic oversight. This is not a clerical error. This is not some minor hiccup in the system. This, ladies and gentlemen, is an absolute human rights violation. When a community is drowning in its own waste, when its children cannot safely walk to school, when its homes are repeatedly flooded, and the very funds allocated to prevent the suffering are returned unspent, that is a profound betrayal. And for such a betrayal, there can be only one just outcome: heads must roll. People need to be fired. People need to be held criminally liable. This is not a suggestion, it is a demand for justice. Now, one might ask, how does such a colossal failure occur? Why would a municipality, entrusted with the well-being of its citizens, fail so spectacularly to utilize vital funds? There are typically three main reasons for underspending in any municipality. The first, and least common, is a genuine lack of capacity, perhaps insufficient personnel in supply chain management. While a problem, this is rarely the primary culprit in such a dire situation. The second reason, which we see more often, is a lack of capability. This is where officials are simply not competent enough to spend funds according to government prescripts, policies, and regulations. It speaks to a profound absence of skill and understanding. But then, we come to the third reason. The most widespread, the most insidious, and tragically, the undeniable reality here in Emfuleni: corruption. This isn't about incompetence, it's about criminal intent. This isn't about a lack of capacity, it's about a surplus of greed. Imagine this scenario, one that plays out day in and day out in our municipalities. An official, let's call them Ayanda, is in charge of a tender process. They have a friend, perhaps Lamka, who wants the tender. But Lamka doesn't have the necessary SARS certification, or the track record, or the expertise. So what happens? Ayanda intentionally withholds the process, delays it, obfuscates, creates hurdles, all to ensure that their friend, Lamka, can get their ducks in a row. Why? For kickbacks. For personal enrichment. To line their own pockets, instead of giving the work to deserving companies, to capable companies, to companies that can actually carry out the duties and bring about the desperately needed change in Emfuleni. This is not merely negligence, this is criminal. This is not just poor management, this is a deliberate act of sabotage against the very people they are sworn to serve. There is a profound lack of political will to change the situation in Emfuleni because, let's be honest, those who benefit from the corruption have no interest in seeing it end. And this is why we say, with every fiber of our being, that people need to be held criminally liable. Not just a slap on the wrist. Not just a reprimand. But full, transparent, and uncompromising criminal prosecution. The rot runs deep, and it is eating away at the very fabric of our society. The brave voices on the ground, like the Bosesa representative Ayanda, is speaking truth to power. They are crying out for justice. And it is our collective moral duty to amplify their voices, to demand accountability, and to ensure that the people of Emfuleni, and indeed all underserved communities, receive the dignity, the infrastructure, and the basic human rights they are entitled to. This isn't just about Emfuleni, it's about the soul of our nation. It's about whether we will stand idly by while the vulnerable suffer, or whether we will rise up and demand that justice prevails. The time for action is now. Share this video. Speak out. Demand accountability. Because Emfuleni, and every community like it, deserves so much more than this unforgivable betrayal.